Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Martha Glory. She's a resilient cult survivor turned influential leader in the wellness industry. She has been committed to her own healing journey for the last 14 years and now finds purpose and passion in helping others navigate the next steps towards their healing. Martha combines professional expertise, personal experience, and spiritual wisdom to inspire survivors to reclaim their lives and thrive. She's the creator of Trauma X, a community of trauma healing battle angels, an Amazon best-selling international author, a dynamic speaker, trauma-informed coach, and is also the TV host of Let Glory Shine. I'm really excited to have Martha on the show today because she has experienced an area of life that not many of us get to experience, let alone know much about. And so I'm excited for her to share her story with us and also how she's healed from that because she's just a very vibrant, glorified person filled with glory and happiness. And after going through what she's been through, I think is incredible. So without further ado, Martha, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Wow, like I should record that and just tell everybody that's how I'd like to be introduced from now on when I get to share a platform because that was soul filling. Thank you so much. That was so kind and thank you so much for sharing your platform with me. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, and I love having people like you on the show. You just bring this level of energy into the environment that's just very uplifting and down to earth, and just it's easy to talk to you, which is why I'm really excited to interview you today. So what I wanted to say too, thank you for letting me know I do good introductions. I try my best to make those work out. So Martha, what I usually start with is having my guests tell a little bit of their grief story up front to get us started in the conversation. And I know you brought up that you're a resilient cult survivor, and I've heard stories about that over the years, mostly through documentaries of things. And so I've never actually talked to somebody who has been part of a cult, let alone broke out of it and broke themselves free to reclaim their life, which is your story. And so I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so you're asking two different questions, right? You're asking about my grief journey, and then you're asking about my cult story. And yes, somewhere they intertwine. But I feel like grief is one of those things that um, can be experienced, but it also is part of who we are or who we have been at some point in some time, right? I've had many different parts of my journey be a grief part of my journey, right? As I had to heal from my experiences of being born and raised in a cult. So I was born and raised in a religious cult in southern or in Wisconsin. I lived in southern Minnesota and lived on a farm. And I love that part of my upbringing. You know, it was very simple. You know, we didn't have TV or radio or newspapers. And, you know, we played outside in the cornfields and in the soybean fields. And we just, you know, like outside was our imagination could go wild. We could do all of the cool things, whatever we could imagine we could do. But the other half of that was that we were every single weekend, we would commute to the compound, which was in Wisconsin, 4.5 hours one way, spend the weekend there, and then come back just in time to go to school on Monday mornings. And so that was my life. Like we didn't have, you know, everything was dictated by the cult, the way we ate, the way we worshiped, the things that we did, the things that we didn't do, the things we were allowed, weren't allowed. Everything was dictated by the rules of the cult. And so, you know, I have this very two very different lives, right? My life during the week and then my life on the weekends, but they intersected so drastically because we lived by whatever you know things that the leader said expected, our dietary things. Everything was constrictive by you know what he allowed or didn't allow. So growing up that way, trauma for me started very early. I started being sexually abused when I was about 8 years old, and I it happened several times with several different people inside and out of the cult in my first 18 years. And so starting to have trauma that early on, you kind of have to disassociate. You have to disassociate from yourself. You have to disassociate from the trauma. You have to, just kind of go inward. And so, in order to survive, and sexual trauma led to physical trauma. And then I was chosen at age 18, moved into the compound. That's when my physical trauma really, really started, even worse. It had been sporadic until that point, and then when I moved into the compound, it became extreme, more like torture than just physical trauma. And so it was just trauma after trauma after trauma building up until I became 18 and then moved into the compound. And then it just got even way, way worse. So I lived there for 8 years, lots of trauma, like I said. And then at age almost 26, I finally decided to escape. And now here we are 20 years later. I've lived many lives in this 46 years that I've been here, and lots of, I'd like to talk more about the grief periods because I know that's your episode, but I'm willing to talk about the cult too.
Well, I just want to first off say I can't imagine what it was like to go through that much trauma, especially at a young age. I've had a couple other podcast guests who've gone through sexual abuse at a very young age, and my heart goes out to people that experience that because it's not something that just sticks with in the moment, but it's something that carries forward as trauma normally does. One of my big things I wanted to ask you about were your I'm guessing your parents were part of that cult too, which is how you were pulled into that environment. But did they support you, or did they just kind of tolerate and allow those norms of the cult, the way you described it, how they control every aspect of your life?
So, my parents were part of it, and I was born into it because of them. So, my parents, uh, because when they joined, they were free thinking hippies. They were searching for something. They had joined, they thought they had found the thing, right? They wanted the community, they wanted the people, they wanted to everyone helping each other, right? That's how a cult starts. And so my parents were very inundated with, and in those early years, with all of the goodness that comes from cult commune living, right? But changes slowly happened over the years. And by the time I was born, the rules were already in effect. And there was always this underlining thing. We don't want to be like the world, because when God chose us, he turned us away from the world and into him, right? So you don't want to belong to the world. We want to be different than the world. So my parents thought, well, this is our salvation. We have to be different than the world. We have to turn away from ours, have to, follow whatever cult man says, because we are the chosen people. We are special. We are chosen, right? And so all of these incremental changes happen so slowly that you don't realize that it's happening because it started out good, right? But it was just those it was how he began controlling. And by the time you wake up, like 30 years has passed and your whole life has passed, and you don't realize what you've given into and what you've sold your soul for. And in my parents' life, it was 9 children and themselves, right? That's what they sold their souls for. And yeah, now we're all putting the pieces back together because of that.
Now, when you went through these traumas and these abuses growing up in that first 18 years of life, were your parents there for you and support you as you went through those things? Because a lot of people, some people have support through that, other people don't. Were they aware of what was going on and made any attempts
No,
to help you with that?
no, absolutely not. And um, in the setup of our cult specifically, you looked to cult man for everything. So my parents weren't really allowed to be parents. When anything went wrong, you went directly to cult man. You didn't go to my parents, right? And so when the first sexual abuse happened, it happened to me from somebody that worked for my dad. So he wasn't part of the cult. And I knew, even at 8 years of age that it was wrong and that it was, bad, right? But I was so scared to tell my parents because I knew my parents would have to tell Cult Man. And I knew that that would, as a child, you think you're going to get in trouble, right? And so I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody until after I had escaped the cult and came home and, we were putting our lives back together the first time my parents found out any of this. So no, I carried it all by
Wow.
myself.
I can't imagine what that was like having to carry that by yourself without support. You didn't have anybody to talk to outside of, I mean, even, your parents weren't supportive and Cult Man kind of guided the ship on that, but there weren't any other people inside the cult you could talk to?
Absolutely not. No, no, it wasn't a safe space for anybody. Not just me, but just anybody. No.
And you brought up that you would go back and forth to the cult over the weekends, that long 4-hour drive. And when you turned 18, you moved into the compound. What was that decision like for you after going through so much of that trauma, moving into that environment at 18?
So it wasn't my choice. I was told that I was moving into the compound. I didn't have a choice. I was ordered. I lived in North Carolina at that time because my family had moved to North Carolina when I was 12. And when we moved to North Carolina, we had a lot more freedom than we ever had when I lived in Minnesota and I was making that commute every weekend. Because now when we lived in North Carolina, we couldn't commute every weekend because it was way too far. So we went, we would go to the compound maybe 5 times a year instead of every single weekend, right? So we had so much more freedom than we ever had before, right? And it was my teenage years, and so I was exploring, and I got into a lot of trouble with Cult Man and with my parents, with sneaking out of the house and drugs and boys, and like, just when you have so many rules, like, I rebelled and I went ape shit crazy because I was just, there was always so many rules and so much trauma going on at the same time, and so I got into a lot of trouble. And so 7 days after graduation, I was ordered to the compound and by Cult Man. And so that was not a decision that I or asked about. That was told to me. And so I moved in. And when I moved to the compound, I have to be completely honest, I thought that it was saving my life. I thought that I was going to be able to reclaim my life because I knew the things that I had done were wrong, right? Like the things, drugs and alcohol and boys, and I knew the things that I had chosen to do were wrong. And so I looked at this as like a blessing. Like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, be forgiven and I can start over and I don't. So I looked at it as a blessing until I actually got there, and literally as soon as my parents drove out of the driveway, everything changed. And I realized that I was in for a really hard time. And why I say that is literally my parents were driving out of the driveway and Cult Man grabbed me and just told me, he was like, "You are so ugly. You're so defiled. God hates you. I hate you. And I don't know how you can like stand in front of me and not be embarrassed and not feel, how ugly you are and how fat you are and how disgusting, like just horrible, horrible things to me." And he said, "You need to go on a cleanse. And, do you want to be forgiven? Do you want to cleanse? Do you want to detox?" And I was like, "Well, of course. And so that began my 5-month starvation, which led to basically my organs shutting down and a near death experience. So more trauma. Um, and the beginning of the 8 years that I spent there, physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, just one trauma after another.
What was that moment for you at 26 where you finally just said enough? And I know you talked a little bit about escaping the cult. What was that like at that point to make those decisions and to even escape from that? Because I know there's always a point with a lot of people in these trauma situations, and I always call it like the mountain peak where it just something breaks, something snaps, and things have to change. And
Yeah.
you'll do it at all costs to save yourself. What was that like for you in that moment?
So, I know this answer always surprises people when I say it, but it's the absolute truth. I didn't make a decision. I did not have enough love for myself or enough awareness for myself or enough care for myself to make a decision for myself. I didn't make it for me. What happened was I had found a sister of mine on the internet, and because my sister had separated from the cult many years before, and I found her on the internet and we started communicating, and I found out she was pregnant. And that was my switch. And the reason why it was my switch is because my parents were still in the cult. My sister had no one. And so her and I had shared a bedroom until I was 18. And her and I were like, we were very close. And so I knew that she needed me. I knew she needed someone. And that was the switch for me. And because we grew up in the cult, we didn't have extended family. And so I didn't know my extended family. She didn't know her extended family. And so there was something in my brain, in my mind, in my heart, something that said this child needs to know their auntie, even though I never got to know my aunties. I knew that this child needed to know her auntie. And that was the switch for me. That's what gave me the courage. That's what gave me the strength. That's what gave me the understanding of, look, come hell or high water, I'm out of here. I will find a way out, was for that baby. And she's now 20.
And I have to that's really incredible. I'm kind of speechless right now because your story is very powerful. But when you made that decision to escape from the compound, I mean, how I know the compound sounds very restrictive and very controlled. How were you able to leave at your own free evolution at that point, or did you have to find a way out in the middle of the night? I mean, how did you find the way to escape
Exactly.
from that?
So absolutely no. Every move of mine was monitored, and so no, I couldn't just of my own volition be like, "Peace out, bitches." No, I was monitored. There were guards and gates and guns, and yes, I couldn't just of my own volition leave. So I was working at the fudge shop, which is a place that the cult owned. And so this man had befriended me, and we, over the years, we built this friendship. I'd known him about 4 years, and we had built this friendship. And eventually, after I found out my sister was pregnant, I started telling him the truth about what was really going on in my life. And he was like a grandfather figure. He was in his 70s, and but he loved me like a granddaughter, or like a daughter. Like he and I had built this beautiful friendship. So when I told him the truth, he was like, I will do whatever I can, to help you get out and to get safely home. And so he's like, but I need to pray about it. And so he started praying about it. Fast forward, he bought me a getaway car, and he is the reason why I eventually was able to get out safely. He provided the funds because I wasn't getting paid for working. I worked for free. And yeah, so I had a guardian angel. His name was Papa, and he helped me get out. And then God sent a winter blizzard that covered the guards' windows and the cars that they sit in at night, and covered the windshields. And I was able to literally walk out the gates without them noticing because of this huge, huge blizzard. So yeah.
That is, I mean, it just sounds like something out of like an action movie kind of thing when you to share that. I mean, that's the kind of thing we watch in Hollywood movies, and I just can't imagine what it was like
Yeah.
actually living that and actually having to escape from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about it in my book, and it's usually one of the first things that people bring up after reading my book. They're like, the scene where you leave the compound and it's snowing and you go to Papa's, and yeah, it was one of the many miracles that happened, was to help me get out. But yeah.
My next question I have for you. So you escaped from the compound, and I mean, thank God, by the way. I'm at this point, I'm really rooting for you, just so you know. And I'm really asking, when you did get escape and you did find a way to connect with your sister, what was life like for you at that point? Because you went from this very controlling environment that, I mean, you were micromanaged in a sense of every walk of life, and now you've got freedom again, and you had freedom for a little bit moving to North Carolina, and you had that inverse reaction of things where you had lots of freedom. What was it like this time around for you with that experience?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And what happened was it's almost like I was so ill prepared for adulting in this world, right? The world in that 8 years had changed so drastically with everything, right? And so I was just ill equipped. I had no tools to operate in this now world as an adult. And so I felt even more like I didn't fit in, even though, yes, I had all of this freedom, but I didn't know what to do with the freedom because, like you said, everything had been controlled, especially over the last 8 years. I was told when I could sleep. I was told when I could eat. I was told when I could shower. I was told when to pray. I literally did not make my own decisions for anything. I wasn't allowed to. So I didn't know how to make my own, even simplest decisions anymore. I was so mind effed because I didn't have the capacity to make even the simplest of decisions. The only thing I knew how to do was to work. And I was a hard worker. And if you gave me a job, I could do it and I could do it better than most people because that's what I knew how to do. So that's what I did. I came home and went to work. The rest of my life was an absolute chaotic circus, for lack of better, because I couldn't do anything right. I was like just a mess. But I was working and I was doing well and I was crawling up the corporate ladder and I was like I was thriving professionally. But personally, I was an absolute mess because I just didn't have the tools. And so I just created chaos. I created more trauma. I created more mess. I created more drama until I finally woke up one day and was like, yeah, this is not working. Gotta try something else. And that's when I started looking for help.
Well, I think that's what's so unique about your situation is that that's all you really knew at that point in life. I mean, you can't even blame yourself, by the way, because when that's all you're shown and that's all you're exposed to and all you're really taught, when you try to break into a new world, it'd almost be like going from one culture to another and not knowing a single
Literally.
thing
Yeah.
about the language or the dialect or the norms, behaviors, any of
Right.
that stuff. Getting dropped in a random place and going, okay, well,
Yeah.
how do I navigate this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So I say often that when I left, it was like I had tools of a 7 or 8 year old, like when my trauma first started, because I had experienced so much trauma by that point that my nervous system was shot. I had no self-esteem, no self-worth, no identity. Like I had the tools of a 8 year old, a 7 or 8 year old, right? And I was trying to navigate in this world where I had to pay bills and I had to like all the other things, and I didn't know how to do any of it. And I now am back in North Carolina. My sister is able to help me a little bit, but now she's, having a baby, and I have brothers, but there's three of them and they're all on heroin. So I have like nobody to turn to, and I'm having to do all of this myself because my brothers are numbing, my sister's raising a child, and I'm just kind of trying to figure it out. And so I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of pain, caused myself a lot of extra pain because of those mistakes. But I'm super proud of myself now because eventually I was like, okay, enough's enough. And I was smart enough not to want to numb. Like I didn't fall into addiction, thank God. I tried lots of things because I think I wanted to have the experience, but I was scared of what was happening to my brother. or my brothers. And so I had to find a different way. And for me, that different way was the chaos that I caused and that I was part of.
So what was it like for you when you decided to make that decision to seek out help, and what kind of help did you seek out? Because I love what you said, that you turned away from a lot of those things of numbing out, because that's what a lot of us do to cope with these big waves of grief or trauma that we go through, because it's a very heavy emotional experience, especially with what
Yeah.
you went through.
Yeah.
And I just applaud you for that, by the way, having the
Thank you.
strength.
Thank
That's
you. So initially I sought out talk therapy, and I went 4 times, and then my therapist basically sat me down and was like, I've never dealt with somebody that was brainwashed. I don't know what to do with you, and I don't know where to refer you. And I was like, well, holy shit, I'm even too broken for a therapist, right? And so I reclused and went wild out again for about another year and a half, until my husband sat me down and was like, I can't keep doing this with you. We got to figure out something, because I was having night terrors. I was having nightmares. I was beating the hell out of him in my sleep. I was fighting. I was in a constant state of fight or flight, and I was making both of us miserable. I was sleepwalking. I was sleep urinating in weird places. Like, we, our home life was a nightmare, a living nightmare. And my husband was like, can't do it. I can't do it. I need this nightmare to end, and I need you to get help, because I don't know what to do with you anymore. We had to add deadbolts on our house, because I would take my clothes off and walk outside naked and do crazy stuff like that, because my nervous system was so hijacked. And so when I say I caused so much chaos, because I didn't know how to deal with my trauma. So finally we had this come to Jesus, where my husband's like, I'm done. Like, I don't know what to do to help you. And he was struggling with, how do we help you? So after that therapist thing, I was in a continuing education class about a year later. And because I had gotten my license as a therapeutic massage therapist. And so I was doing my continuing ed, and I was in a somatics class. And that somatics class, the teacher was talking about trauma, and she was talking about trauma being stored on a cellular level. And she was referencing this book, Body Keeps the Score. And it literally hit me in the face. And I was like, holy crap, this is me. I am trauma stored on a cellular level. And as she talked, I just began to weep. I just began to shake, because it became so real. This is what's wrong with me. It's the trauma. It's everything that I've been through, that I thought that I left in the past, that I thought I put away, that is coming up, that's causing all of this, right? And so I was so excited. I went home and I was like, I think I know what's wrong with me. And, and so then I had something to go off of. So I became my own advocate. And leading up to this somatics class, I had been bouncing around for the last year in the Western medicine, neurologist, gastroenterologist, just one specialist after another, because I had so many chronic issues by now. I had fibromyalgia, I had migraines, I had neck pain, back pain, gastrointestinal issues, PTSD, complex PTSD, you name it. I was struggling. Like, I was just given diagnosis, 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 diagnosis. And so, but nobody was able to help me. Everybody wanted another scan or wanted me to take another pill. And I was like, there's just not enough. I can't, none of it's helping me. None of it's saving me. None of it's fixing me. Right. And so after this somatics class, I was like, I'm done with Western medicine. They're clearly not being able to help me. And so I had to become my own advocate. And so I started doing research, and I started finding holistic modalities like neurofeedback, biofeedback, craniosacral therapy, Reiki. Like, I started finding all these other holistic therapies, and I started using them. And slowly I started feeling better. I started releasing weight. I started having less migraines. I started, like, all the connective physical issues and internal, like everything is all connected, right? And so I started seeing all of these different improvements because I was doing these modalities, inner child work, cognitive therapy, all of these things that I started doing started helping me go inward and started helping me start healing that the traumas of, my childhood leading up into when I left the cult and then after I left the cult. And that's really when the grieving process started for me. I wouldn't say that I knew even what grief was until I started healing. And then there were so many different seasons of grief. Like I had to grieve that little girl and that I wasn't able to save her. I had to grieve so many different parts of my life, right? And so many different things that had happened. I had to grieve my marriage because then my marriage came to an end while I was healing, like all of these different things. And then I miscarried and I had to grieve that, like all these different grieving seasons happened during my healing process, right? Over the last 14 years. And that's when I really started understanding grief. But then I understood it in a way of like, it's also cathartic to actually allow yourself to feel. And I hadn't felt my entire life because feeling was unsafe. Feeling, you know what I mean?
Yeah, feeling is that's a place that after going through all the trauma I've gone through in my own life, losing a child and losing my grandfather I was really close to. I was forced to feel in those moments. I didn't get a choice to run from them or avoid them. I had to face it, and that's a big pain. I think a lot of people, when they have the option, we run from it because it's really this feeling of connecting with our inner self is the best way I can phrase that. You have to face your demons, is what I like to
Right.
call it. And that's a scary place for a lot of people because we've got so much outside things hitting us saying, "Oh, you're a bad person because of this. Oh, you're a bad person because of that." Or, "Oh, you're thinking this or you're thinking that." But we don't ever give ourselves space to just say, "I am who I am." And I think the way I think because of my experiences of life, what I've gone through, what I've had to deal with, what I've had to grieve. And that's what I always say on my podcast is you find out, this, I call this a safe space. I call this the no judgment. I tell all my guests that be authentically you, whatever way it has to be. And when I tell people that phrase, it's so funny when I look at their face because some people I see this like, whoa, I can actually be myself. And then other people go, okay, I'm in. And I can tell it's because we don't give ourselves that space in society to just be that. And that's where I think because it's almost like numbing out with a drug. You're basically covering things up when you don't allow that, but it's going to resurface
Right.
at a
Right.
certain point. And when
Some,
it does
yeah.
resurface, by the way, that might come out in, drugs or alcohol
Yeah.
or, doing something stupid, whatever it is. It might come out that
Right.
way
Yeah.
versus if you let yourself be with
Yeah.
it and sit with it and say, I accept this. I don't like it or agree with it, but I accept it
Right.
and give yourself that space to process.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the feeling part is, I don't want to skip over that because it's so important, right? For me, it wasn't safe to feel from a very early age, right? Because it was just so much trauma. And so I kind of had to numb out just to stay alive, just to, exist. And so when I started feeling, when I got out of the cult, that's actually what started creating the chaos around me because my conscious was like, and my subconscious was like, what, we feel now? What are you talking about? We haven't felt in decades and now you want to feel, right? And so everything was just trying to find this, like, what are we doing? Right. And so once I started the healing journey and started gaining tools in my tool belt and started dealing with the past and started being able to feel and understanding that I had to feel it in order to heal it, in order to release it, in order to forgive it. All of that starts with feeling it. I had to feel it, right? And slowly starting to trust myself to feel again. And that's huge. Like I had to trust myself to start feeling again because it was safe now, or safer than it had ever been, right? And so I had to go through all of these different things of learning these tools and learning to trust myself, learning to love myself. Well, first to like myself and then to love myself and to trust myself and to understand that this was a process and I wasn't going to get out of it quickly, just like I didn't get into it quickly, right? It's been a long and arduous, beautiful journey, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that I went on it.
Well, I think one of the big things that you talked about is feeling your emotions. And that's something I really, really love about you saying that because not enough people do. And what I have learned on my own personal journey through coaching is that when we don't allow ourselves to feel emotions, they sit inside us trapped. And what they
Yep,
actually end up doing, by the way, it's like if you ever watch a ping pong tournament, when that ball's going back and forth about 5,000 miles an hour, it's doing that inside you. And
yep,
that's why you end up with random pain in your body, or you end up with gastrointestinal problems or
100%.
weird aches. And
Yep,
I tell people a lot during coaching that, and I don't say this is a standard rule across the board, but when it is somebody with trauma, I always ask the question about what are you really feeling right now? Because if you're having a weird back pain or weird neck pain, 9 times out of 10, it may not actually be a physical pain, but your
right.
body's manifesting this emotional
Yes.
pain somewhere.
Yeah,
And that pain is not a bad thing. What your
yeah,
body's actually trying to do is say, hey, there's an emotion or a feeling I need you to feel right now. And I
yeah,
need you to say, I feel this way, or I see you, I
yeah,
understand you, I get
yeah,
you. And you'll be shocked, if you give yourself the place, like Martha's saying today on this podcast, to feel how you feel, that pain will go away so fast it'll make your head spin because you
yeah.
actually acknowledged how you feel. And
Right.
that's one of the best things you could ever say. So I appreciate you sharing
Absolutely.
that.
Yes. And I say so often, like, the all of the list and the diagnoses that I was getting from this healthcare provider and this specialist, none of them, not a single one of them ever said, hey, do you have trauma in your past? Not a single one, right? Not a single one. And so, what I've come to understand though, all of those things that I was having, the chronic back pain, the chronic neck pain, the gastrointestinal issues, the migraines, all of these different things that I was experiencing in my physical body, it was an outer manifestation of an internal problem. The internal problem being the trauma, right? And so when I started being able to put words to it and put feelings to it and put emotions to it, and understand that I had to feel it in order to heal it, in order to release it, all of those things, forgive it, all of those different things. And now, to your point about feelings and emotions, like I say this too, like emotions and feelings are information about something. So when you
Mm.
are having a feeling or an emotion about something, that is information. It is not fact, right? So understanding that emotions and feelings are not facts, they're information that's trying to tell us something, get our attention, something about that, right? That we need to listen to and that we need to sit with until we understand what it is that it's trying to tell us. Because it's always trying to tell us something. And so, just to your point, exactly what you were saying, like when we sit with that and we actually feel it and actually tune in and go, okay, all right, my back's hurting. What's going on? Let's really feel it. Let's really think about it. Let's really sit with it. You're exactly right. Once you feel it, and then you can release it and heal it.
Well, I love what you said because I put it in my own words in coaching. I tell people that emotions are messengers. They're not things to be. I always laugh because there's this phrase out there. I've heard it for years, and everybody says, "Well, I got to control my emotions." And I said, your emotions right here, I can't hold it or grab it or manipulate it. I can't do that, right? So that whole concept of controlling your emotions is just gone. Don't just forget that, leave it out the window. But like
That's
what Martha said,
psychotherapy. That's psychotherapy. And no.
no, it doesn't work. When you take Martha's way of saying things too, when we talk about emotions are communicating something to us, they're information. When you get into that place of saying, for example, I'm angry or I feel angry, and you ask yourself not why do I feel it, ask yourself what's causing me to feel angry. And you start to sit there and say, I don't feel safe right now, or I don't feel seen, or I don't feel heard. And then you can ask, what's causing me to feel that? And you get down to the person in front of me is not holding space for me, or this person's not
Mhm.
allowing me to have my own opinion, or they're not respecting me. When you get to that place, that emotional intensity comes down. And when it comes down, it doesn't mean you got over it or you let it go, but what it does do, by the way, is puts control back in you to decide how you want to handle that and how you want to respond to it. Because now instead of reacting to something, you're responding, and responding is where we have control. And that's what I love about your story that you just said today about being your own advocate. Doctors love to just say, oh, here, take a pill, take a shot. Oh, here's a diagnosis. But they never ever say, do you have trauma you're going through? Did you experience something? They leave that out of the equation. And so, unfortunately, you can take all the drugs in the world, by the way, you can do that. But it's never going to fix the problem. It's almost like throwing a patch on something that needs stitches. And
It's a
so,
band-aid. Yeah.
it's a band-aid. So until we actually get down there and say, "Oh, you have trauma. Let's talk about that. What happened there?" And let that person get that stuff out, that's when we can start saying, "Okay, this is not this over here. It's this thing." And now we can be more specific about helping somebody navigate through that journey.
Yeah. And just to emphasize, like, mainstream healthcare, Western medicine has come a long way in the last 20 years, because even when you have your physical now, they'll ask you about trauma, right? So I think that there's a lot more to understanding how everything's connected, and how mind, body, spirit are connected, and how physical body and emotional body are connected to physical ailments. I think that's starting to shift in Western medicine. And so I'm always happy to hear when they're drawing parallels and understanding, this is all connected. You can't separate one from the other because we're one being.
Well, Martha, you said something that stood out really powerful to me a few minutes ago, and it's still in my head, and I love this about you is becoming your own advocate. I cannot describe how powerful that simple thing was that you said, but it's very big and very powerful. I do feel like in a lot of way in today's world, even in medicine and even in therapy land, we're so quick to title things and label things very quickly, and we don't really actually take time to process what's in front of us. And so I do believe that becoming your own advocate is probably one of the best things you can do because I try to tell people that go through grief and loss and trauma the following is that nobody's had your experience of life, not a single
Correct.
person. And on
Correct.
top of that, no one's actually going to fully understand it the way you're going to understand it. And so I think to become your own advocate is really saying that I don't want to generalize my experience, nor should I. And on top of that, I'm not just something to be thrown in a box to be dealt with. I need acknowledgement. I need understanding. I need people who may have walked a similar path in my life to come across and help me. And I need to be careful who I open up to and who I'm vulnerable with because when we become our own advocate, what's really nice about that is we're not putting our faith in other people, but we're putting it within ourselves. And that's where we can really truly discover who's there to hurt me and who's there to help me and really
Yeah.
identifying those things as we go through a healing process.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for me, becoming my own advocate meant that I was actually taking responsibility for my own life. And that was huge because I was never taught how to be responsible for myself. I was never taught how to be responsible for anybody, right? Like, I was just following the rules and I was told what to do, and right, like, but I wasn't taught how to be empowered. I wasn't taught how to, yeah. And so for me, becoming my own advocate meant that I was taking responsibility for my own life and my wellness and for my physical body, my emotional. And it became this melding of my faith and this desire to get to know myself, and then tiptoeing into these modalities and being like, okay, can I trust this? Is this helping me, or is it not resonating? And if it didn't resonate, I had to learn to trust myself. It was a very long process because I didn't know, like, because I had trust issues. Surprise.
Yeah.
Right? And so I didn't forwardly trust every practitioner that I went to. But as I started doing the work and realized that I could trust myself, and I was building this intuition muscle and I was building this faith muscle, that I could trust my intuition, I could trust my faith. And that started leading me down this road of finding the practitioners that I needed to work with and that were helping me take another layer off, dig a little deeper, do more work and to discover more tools and to discover more of me. And so becoming my own advocate was the most powerful and courageous thing that I have ever done.
Well, that leads me into my next question I have for you here is you created this group Trauma X, a community of trauma healing battle angels. And I just have to say, Martha, that is a really badass name for your group. I really love that. I just love that about you. How did you start that? And how did you get there?
Yeah. So I had just written my book and which was put out last May, Glory Going All In. And it was a three-part book about my cult journey, my healing journey, and then my principles of my coaching program, my trauma coaching program. And so I was on a coaching call with one of my coaches, and he was like, what are your people called? Are they called warriors? Are they called survivors? Are you like, what are your people called? And I was like, I freaking hate survivors. Like survivors, like, well, thank God I survived. But once are you just a survivor? Or like there's more to life than just surviving. I want to be more than just a survivor, right? And so my book is called Glory Going All In, Courageous or Survivor to Courageous Warrior, a cult survivor to courageous warrior. And so I'm like, that's a little cliche, a little overused. I want something that really speaks to this journey of having to do the hard work and having to fight for what you believe in and what you want to reclaim self as, right? Like an understanding that this is a battle of self. And so I just came up with Battle Angel. I'm like, like you have to fight for yourself. You have to win the war of self in order to heal. And so it became the Battle Angels, and it just resonated with every client that started going through my coaching program. And they were like, I'm a badass battle angel. And it wasn't just women. It wasn't just women. It was men too. They're like, I'll be called a battle angel. Come on. And so it became this thing. And so my Trauma X were the battle angels. Yeah.
I just really love that, and I couldn't agree more with you. That term survivor, I feel the same way when I hear it, and I've heard it for years. And I'm like, yeah, cool, you're a survivor. Like it has that feel of things. But when I heard trauma healing battle angel, I was like, that sounds like you not only survived something, but you like went over and thrived from it. Like
Right.
you just you
Right.
just you just eviscerated it out of your life.
Right. You
And that's
reclaimed.
what yeah, and I've talked to so many people that have gone through trauma, and I don't ever hear them talk about themselves in survivorship. I never hear a single
Right.
one say it. And I see these people. Uh, I've recorded 97 podcasts, I think, to this point, and every single person's out there doing beautiful work like you, and that's why I love doing my podcast. Honestly, I'll tell my whole audience this: I love doing this podcast because I meet people like Martha that went through a severe trauma in their life and a big one that lasted a long time, and they're now out there in the world doing such beautiful work, supporting other people that have gone through trauma, getting them to recognize their self, trusting themselves, learning to love themselves, and really being their own advocate in so many ways. And so I look at that and say that we're not always defined by our trauma, but I think we're more defined by how we rise above it and who we become. Because when you look back on those things, and if you were to sit there and say, well, I wish this never happened to me, well, you might not be the person you are today. And I know
Right.
that sounds really cliche, but it's so
True.
empowering to say that.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I say that all the time, right? Because I have people say like, "How can you not be mad?" or "How can you not be angry? How can you forgive all those the people that did all this stuff to you?" I'm like, look at me. I'm a badass. I am, like I have come so far. I have come literally from the depths of hell, and I get to live the life that I get to live now, and I get to help others out of the depths of hell. How could I be mad at the people that hurt me? Because had they not hurt me, I wouldn't be the person that I've become, because I wouldn't have had to go on this healing journey, right? It's not an excuse. It's not a like, I'm not making light of it, but the things that I went through were the things that I ended up having to heal from, that created this person that I get to be today. why would I have otherwise become this person? I wouldn't have. Those are the things that created the person that you see today, that's doing the things like showing up for other battle angels, holding their hand and walking alongside them as they step into their, next step of their healing journey, regardless of whatever that is, right? There's a lot of pain in the world, a lot of pain in the world. And a lot of times pain makes us feel so alone, so isolated, so like nobody's going to understand us. I do. Been there, right? And I wouldn't have that ability to resonate with them if I hadn't had my own trauma story, right? And so no, I don't regret any of the things that I've been through because they made me, because God knew that I would do the work required in order to heal from it so that I could step into the badass that I've become.
That is so beautiful. I absolutely love that. And Martha, I'm so glad that we got to connect today on this podcast. You have shared such a powerful journey that was in no way, shape, or form easy by any demeanor. And you fought through some serious struggles and trials, and you even got help along the way. I want to give a shout out to Papa for breaking you out of that cult. I want to give a shout out to that man because I truly believe God puts people like that on our path when we need it.
100%.
And I mean, I'm just thinking about how powerful that moment is. I need to buy your books. I really want to read the details on that. Um, but you've just shared a beautiful journey of going through the hardships of trauma and learning how to re-love yourself, even like
Mm,
yourself, as you said. And not only that, but become a thriving battle angel. I mean, I just really love your story of empowerment. You're the epitome of Empower Grief Journey. And that's what I
thank
love
you.
about you is you don't have to have anger and hate towards those things. You don't have to live there and say that is all happening to me. This all sets you up to be in a place to help and serve other people. And look at you 20 years later, by the way, 20 years later. And then you've
Yeah,
got the biggest smile on your face. You're helping people with the community. And you're also a TV host of Let Glory Shine. I mean, you
I'm pretty
are
lucky. Yeah.
you're an amazing individual.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. I cannot believe that an hour has already like zipped by. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and it's always great to just be able to share with somebody that holds space, and you did an amazing job. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Martha. And as I wrap up my podcast, I usually ask my guests a couple questions. One of them is if you were to run into somebody who's going through trauma or grief, or maybe somebody who feels stuck in that, what's one, two things you would share with them that could help them navigate that just a little bit easier?
Wow. So many, but the first thing I would do is hug them and just let them know that I'm here and hold that space for them, because I know what it's like to feel alone. I know what it's like to be abandoned. I know what it's like to be isolated and think that nobody understands me. And so a hug is healing in itself. And then I would just let them know that you're never alone. You are never alone unless you abandon yourself. You're never alone.
That is beautiful advice because we did talk about that a little earlier in the podcast today that grief and trauma can feel very isolating because there's people that may not resonate with you or understand it, or it may be very overwhelming for them to hear. But I want you listeners to know too, if you are going through grief and trauma, which is why I'm assuming you're listening to this show, taking Martha's advice, you're never alone. And I want you to know there's people out there, especially in the trauma world, there are trauma survivors in all facets of life. And there is going to be somebody out there that's going to look at you like Martha. They're probably going to give you a big hug and say, I get you. I understand you. And that person, by the way, is going to make that feeling and hold that space, like Martha said, for you to work through things. And so look out there for a papa for you. I'm just going to put that out there because there are people walking the planet like
Yeah.
him, and they will cross your path when they need to. So,
Yeah.
um, Martha, I also want to ask you, where can we look for this book? And if listeners want to get connected with you and join the Battle Angels group, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I'll send you my link tree where they can find all of the information. It has my book, it has my TV show, it has everything. So you can put that in the show notes. I'll send that over.
Perfect. And for listeners listening, I will have that link in the show notes when you get done listening to this episode. I definitely recommend reaching out to Martha. She is a very vibrant, thriving battle angel. And I just promise you guys, reach out and connect with her. She's an amazing individual. So, Martha, thanks again for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Chris. So much fun. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Martha and I today on this episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Martha's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you, visit empoweredgriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empowered Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.